Hey there, welcome back to the Knowledge Bombs for Military Transition. Jared H. Smith here, and today, the stealth of wealth. Are you blinded in the dark or by the light? In the summer of 1997, a few months before my senior year in high school, my dad was plumbing a new home for a week. Yes, in the North Texas heat, and I contributed to the effort. I'd been working in construction with my uncle building custom homes since I was 12, and this was just another job to so-called stack some more cash. Long days, shorter nights, and the expectation of a hefty paycheck at the end of the week. My dad was an employee for the majority of his life, and he was teaching me a lesson this summer before graduating from high school and heading out into the real world. I started out making $2.50 per hour picking up scrap lumber around the job site. I'd reached $10, maybe $12 per hour by the week I was helping my old man. That Friday came, and he said he couldn't pay. Bills were stacked up, and I'd have to wait. I was upset about that as a 17-year-old, but don't remember the exchange I had with him over it. I was probably planning on spending that cash on something for my truck or on a girl or who knows what. And those plans fell through in a heartbeat because I didn't own the job or the cash I thought was forthcoming. In this week's Knowledge Bombs for Military Transition, we're dive bombing the last of the life pillars and focused on this idea of wealth. It's a 21-minute read or listen on the go at 1.5 times playback speed. It'll take you 14 minutes to complete, but don't miss the graphics in this edition if you're a listener. A young officer's question. Quote, financial freedom with regards to separation or retirement. Where should we begin looking or planning? Close quote. That was a second lieutenant equivalent ensign halfway through a training pipeline early in 2020. That's the question a young junior officer asked me as I began mentoring him in early 2020. We've lost touch since he went to the fleet for his first operational assignment, but it's a great question from someone who's 20 years behind me on the assembly line of uniform service. I enjoyed mentoring him on the topics in the shadows of uniform service, as many, dare I say most, are focused on the job, promotion, being deployment ready, and maximizing family services to support the service member and the so-called greater good. And it's all a trap for that inevitable last day on active duty. To get a jump on it all, download my free overview of the art of war for military transition, and sign up for a complimentary 15-minute reconnaissance session to get the full version of the art of war for military transition. It will equip you with the necessary information for totally informed mission planning and fully mission-capable readiness, because deployment readiness is transition readiness. The ensign's question, we'll call him Ensign Murphy, demonstrated to me that he's both in the dark on personal finances as it pertains to the military pay system and all the so-called benefits we're showered with while dependent on a government paycheck. And his family is dependent upon the services DoD offers the Armed Forces family, so we service members can focus completely and totally on the mission and taking care of our people. It also told me that he's blinded by the light of the status quo offerings perpetuated by the lame Wall Street banksters, guidance, and government bureaucrats who are stripping the wealth right from under our nose in a very stealthy way. Recall this Knowledge Bomb series editions from the work column in the series that covers jobs, efforts, taxes. These ideas put forth with the JET acronym touch every single aspect of today's wealth discussion. What follows is why that's true. The wealth landscape. After a self-crash course combined with real-time observation of the economic environment, I now know all I'd learned growing up from a lower middle-class family and all that I hadn't been taught in public academia was skewed and partially true. The ideas presented were limited ideas entertained by people who didn't know either. And recall, we get what we pay for. The system is rigged against us, the little folk forced into using dead instruments through our dash through life. Yes, that's you and me in the military, no matter your so-called net worth as seen on paper or shown on a screen. Financial freedom beyond the uniform is directly tied to your wealth positioning for your one and only liberty event. That's a big L, liberty, when you finally shed the rank and jump off the tank, ship, or plane. For us, the definition is wealth. Traditionally, 1, value of all the resources possessed by an individual or society. 2, a great quantity or store of valuable possessions, property, money, or other riches. And 3, for today's definition, creating and sustaining individual freedom, which results from detailed consideration of 6 wealth pillar elements as follows. 1, time, the minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, and decades between life and death. The dash on the headstone at the grave that's carved between your year of birth and year of death. 2, knowledge, what we know and what we learn about anything. Our ability to communicate it, though, is where the true opportunity exists. 3. Assets. Not your residential home, which is likely a liability, but insurance policies, credit availability and access, government benefits on active duty, equities, securities, and yourself, as in your health, your unique experiences, and your value, human capital and knowledge made available to the world, our country, your community, and your family. Your mind and how you let it see the world and how we let the world see it through communication dictates our destiny. 4th, currency and cash flow, in effect, purchasing power. Something generally accepted as a medium of exchange, a measure of value in a monetary sense, or a means of payment. We are in a fiat currency system. Do you know what that is? If not, learn quickly. 5th, money, a store of value and unit of account that can act as a medium of exchange with the following 6 properties of fungible, durable, divisible, portable, cognizable, and scarce. Note, scarcity is where the Federal Reserve note fails as sound money today. Uncle Scam is issuing debt like a drunken sailor on Lady Liberty's line of credit, and Sugar Daddy at the Federal Reserve System is buying as much credit as Uncle Sammy Scam desires. Prosperity, a condition of being successful or thriving, traditionally from an economic well-being point of view. At its root, economy is the balance of supply and demand for goods and services in markets where a medium of exchange is used to swap value. And lastly, a bonus, 7th element, known as wisdom. It's up to you to figure out how this fits into your family wealth picture. And I've got an asterisk on relationships here too, which applies to all 3 life pillars of health, self, and wealth. Relationships are the state of being connected or related to a network and community. The mutual dealings, connections, or feelings that exist between 2 parties, countries, people, etc. A personal or business relationship. Closely related to relationships, but not one of the 6 elements of wealth, is wisdom, as previously noted. Here, wisdom is defined as an ability to think critically and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. And be careful with common sense, as in my experience, it is an uncommon virtue. The U.S. government's national debt has grown from $1 trillion in 1971 to over $30 trillion today, a 30x increase in 50 years. It's based on IOU, nothing debt-based notes and based on trust alone, domestically and internationally. That trust was very likely lost on the global stage in recent months when the U.S. confiscated Russian financial reserves assets, a move that was a first of its kind in all of history under the variables in which that move was made. Now, the only belief holding together faith in the currency is the domestic faith, but as it says right there on that Federal Reserve note in your wallet, quote, "In God we trust," close quote. I always enjoy bringing up the follow-on statement used by data scientists and statisticians afterwards, too. All others bring data. And historically, the data says the U.S. currency is in big trouble. Issuing or creating that much currency in such a short amount of time was an extremely dangerous move by out-of-touch bureaucrats in the deep state ran by the corporatocracy, and Russia's reaction to NATO and the Ukrainian response is likely feeding the military-industrial congressional complex exactly what it lives on, war. And now you're thinking, our military is strong and will always back our currency. Maybe, maybe not. The U.S. military supply chains are heavily dependent upon overseas suppliers. If those suppliers no longer take their Federal Reserve note, aka the U.S. dollar, for payment, will the military be able to function getting its raw materials and supplies domestically when those domestic suppliers depend on foreigners for their supply chains to produce the raw materials and piece components for assembly by the military-industrial congressional complex stateside? It's worth considering. The real deal. Can you handle the truth bombs? Retirement savings and the financial markets are top of mind for those who've got their hard-earned efforts, energy, and precious time from their past work weeks, months, and years tied up in complicated financial services vehicles with valuations continuing to fall sharply off the highs from December 2021. The lamestream media is pointing the bright lights at the shiny objects, keeping many on Main Street very distracted, dazed, and confused. That's what hard slaps to the face do. They rock your world. If your head isn't in the sand, it could be admiring the light. And warning, it's not the northern lights either. The light advice is the legacy model over the past 40 years. Stay the course, buy the effing dip. YOLO, you'll only live once. Tina, there is no alternative. Buy term and invest the rest. The market always goes up. Refi, cash out to reinvest in real estate. Mortgage a house and rentals to low interest rates. And reinvest the proceeds. The same approach was being taken by inexperienced investors in the late 1990s and again in the early 2000s, and the banks made out like the investment bankster bandits that they are. Will you suffer the same fate as those who failed to study history and being doomed to repeat it? Here are some recent headlines out of the minds of successful entrepreneurs and investors from the past 2 to 7 decades. Legendary investor Bill Gurley tweeted some pearls of wisdom. Quote, an entire generation of entrepreneurs and tech investors built their entire perspectives on valuation during the second half of a 13-year amazing bull market run. The unlearning process could be painful, surprising, and unsettling to many. I anticipate denial. Some thoughts. Previous all-time highs are completely irrelevant. It's not cheap because it is down 70%. Forget those prices happened. 2. Valuation multiples are always a hack proxy. Dangerous to use. If you insist, 10x should be considered amazing and an upper limit. Over that, silly. 3. You should be shocked to learn that people want to value your company on FCF and earnings. Facebook trades at 14x GAAP earnings per share and is growing 23%. What earnings multiple are you assuming? Lastly, revenue and earnings quality matter. And with Amazon facing its biggest drawdown since 2009, none other than Jeff Bezos had some thoughts on the shit show that's evolving, echoing Bill Gurley's comments. Quote, Bill is without doubt one of the smartest people I know and always worth listening to. Most people dramatically underestimate the remarkableness of this bull run. Such things are unstoppable until they aren't. Markets teach, the lessons can be painful. Close quote. And note, Jeff Bezos cashed out a large portion of his Amazon stock late last year. Inside this edition is an S&P 500 worst performance through 82 trading days graphic that I encourage you to come look at if you're listening. There's a whole lot of red on this chart. And then lastly, sometimes you must scratch your head with respect to remarks from the three-letter agencies at the world level, with remarks by the IMF director Kristalina Georgina, such as this, quote, we printed too much money and didn't think of the unintended consequences. We're like 8-year-olds playing soccer chasing the ball. Really, how can this be? Top it off with this statement from the Bank of International Settlements. Quote, inflation has surprisingly flared up this past year. You didn't even see it coming? How confident do you feel with those who decide when and how our money is created and spent? See what the Bank of International Settlements says about gold. Quote, gold is free of default risk. Quote, gold bullion is the only case of a financial asset with no counterpart liability. Quote, gold kept at home is not subject to political manipulation. Quote, gold has been empirically proven to serve as an inflation hedge. And lastly, quote, its most widely recognized feature is its potential value in highly adverse scenarios. Don't you feel it's time to become your own central bank? It's time to get your assets covered. And then from the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meeting, quote, we have people who know nothing about stocks being advised by stockbrokers who know even less, close quote, Munger said. It's an incredible, crazy situation. I don't think any wise country would want this outcome. Why would you want your country's stock to trade on a casino? Believe any of that? Fear-mongering, is it? Are you certain? Does it make you question anything you know or think that you know based on the traditional model of go to school, get a job, mortgage a house, save for retirement, send the kids to higher education to load up on debt, enter a fickle job market with suppressed wages and perpetuate the corporate greed that's got us into this mess? And that's the point. There are no certainties, only probabilities. Back to the basics. How well diversified are you in this extremely risky environment? Diversification, allocation, and position sizing combined with extensive knowledge of particular industries and markets helps to put probabilities in your favor. But this idea doesn't apply only to financial assets. What about food, water, shelter, energy? All of these basics at the base of Maslow's hierarchy are important to consider and all connect back to the monetary, so-called money system. Are you assuming the grocer will always have the next 9 meals worth of groceries available to you at a price your job or pension check can afford? There's no liberty in assuming that. That's dependence at its very core. Are you assuming the grocer will always have the next 9 meals worth of groceries available to you at your price your job or pension check can afford? There's no liberty in assuming that. That's dependence at its very core. What about work? Are you dependent upon a job or upon a pension from the government, federal, state, or local, that's drastically losing its purchasing power right before your eyes, month after month? If you're prepared, you won't be scared. When you're not scared, you can think clearly and respond to the environment rather than reacting to the situation. Where will you be when it hits the fan, if it's not already there? But I believe it is. The splatter just hasn't hit us yet. Fortunately, I've got my umbrella open. Do you have yours? Avoiding the bombs, sidestepping the ambushes. Overcoming all you've likely been lied to believe about wealth is the first and highly necessary step in achieving your liberty and freedom once you return to society after military service. And that day will come, or you'll be less than the 1% who sacrificed all for the greater good. But the stats show that's highly unlikely. Best to be prepared, which shows you really do care about yourself, your spouse, your kids, extended family, friends, and acquaintances. They'll all be affected by what the service member does or doesn't do ahead of transition. Adam Grant said, "Intelligence is traditionally viewed as the ability to think and learn. Yet in a turbulent world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more, the ability to rethink and unlearn." That's the quote I use in Chapter 12 of my book, The Call to Action for Mission Planning, Preparations, and Workups for the Armed Forces Family. Quick side note, I've decided that profits for the book will be diverted to the Warriors Refuge for multiple reasons between Memorial Day and Veterans Day this year. After that, we'll reassess to see if another veteran service organization can use future book profits or if the Warriors Refuge in West Columbia, Texas will continue requiring support from our Liberty Movement. Now back on track. Recall, deployment readiness is transition readiness. From the earliest days in service, starting now. The book is the starting point for you or the Armed Forces family you know. The service member will either make the ultimate sacrifice or get the liberty they planned for before the liberty battle, win or lose. It'll be enjoyable liberty or liberty that's hated. But it'll be liberty from uniformed service, and it's up to each Armed Forces family to intentionally, informatively plan for it. And planning with a team is smart. It's how we planned every other mission we ever worked up for. I'll help guide you to the true freedom that's well within your grasp if you intentionally and holistically plan for it, starting now. Planning for that inevitable event, death before separation or life beyond it, must start today. There is no time to lose. Schedule a complimentary 15-minute reconnaissance session so we can expose the open flanks and begin planning. Not only do wealth considerations matter, but so do health and self-considerations too. Check out the previous 2 weeks' editions for more on that. There's no way around the key to liberty and freedom being directly tied to wealth, period. The fog of fallacy. It took me about a year to fully realize the extent of my deficiencies basing decisions off of the marketing and sales, in fact, influence environment from corporations, the media, and the government engulfs our society in. And from the sales reps that are around every corner and at the click of every button online. Beware the advice of someone who depends on your purchasing their financial services vehicles for their livelihood. But once you see through the smoke and fog of this war, it'll be crystal clear to you that you've been deceived. Retirement planning is a sham. Yes, that includes TSP and the greedy executives and their henchmen on Wall Street, along with the Federal Reserve and the banksters working for its shareholders, will rob you blind of not only your money, but of your life. But only if you let them. Instead of saving and skimping while living your life in a scarcity and poverty mindset, trying to save long enough for a day that may never come, retirement. What about living free, truly free, throughout your entire life, enjoying the best of work and leisure simultaneously, working hard and playing harder while young and old? Now that's true wealth, wouldn't you agree? Doing what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want, where you want, and having the ability to relocate or stay is freedom. That's what the Constitution you raised your right hand for and swore to defend allows for those with wealth to do. And you're supporting the wealthy, stealthy class and defending their ability to continue doing so. Without wealth, you must succumb to a job that you likely hate and a simple presence in the world, not true life with freedom and liberty to pursue your passions. Returning to the pillars, let's briefly discuss each. Time. Spending it daily until we're dead. It's the dash on our headstone. We can't buy another minute for our day, but we can purchase other people's time if we plan well enough to do so and equip ourselves with the necessary knowledge to do so. Knowledge. Nobody can take what we know from us, but to monetize knowledge, we must be able to communicate with people whom we've built great relationships with, who trust us. Assets. Read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert T. Kiyosaki, U.S. Marine. It's the baseline approach to wealth accumulation and positions you on the edge of the coin to see both sides. Agree with his philosophy, we'll get along great. If you don't, there's opportunity elsewhere. I won't spend my time trying to convince you. Enjoy servitude. Currency and money. Not the end-all be-all. In the U.S., and in fact around the globe, all, quote, money, close quote, as we call it, is a fiat currency and not money today. If you aren't familiar with that concept, don't you think getting smart on the systems you're living and working in is necessary? Go learn about fiat money. Purchasing power parity, it matters. Store value over a long time, Learn the difference. Wisdom, up to you to figure out how this fits into your Armed Forces family wealth picture. And prosperity, the feeling we'll get from doing great in the one life we have, with all the minutes of every day. What is success to you? It's a deep question, and one that requires reflective thought and looking inwards while educating ourselves, not through traditional academia, but as an autodidact. And a guide can help. And relationships. They're all that matters during your dash on this pale blue dot. Don't forget it, live it. Back to the summer of 1997. My relationship with my dad was strained on that hot Texas day when he didn't pay me for my time, effort, and energy after an honest week's work. 22 years later, he handed me $500 for the job. I didn't even remember that week or that I was owed the pay either. Below is a picture of the envelope which he asked me to open after I was on the plane, headed to Virginia to begin my second master's degree program, the National Defense University's Dwight D. Eisenhower experience that would eventually result in the Liberty Accelerator being born. I got teary-eyed when I did, too. Sign up for a no-cost and zero risk until the end of May. No charge until 1 June. Read the book this month and you get a complimentary 1-hour Liberty Strategy session, too. The note my dad gave me with the $500 in it said on the front, Jared, plumbing, labor, and interest from 1997. And on the back, I was trying to make sure you continued your education. By now, I'm sure you're asking, what's the punchline, Jared? What gives? How does this relate to wealth? The stock market just finished its worst first quarter in a very, very long time. That retirement savings you believe is safe in the custody of a stranger in an institution that counts you as a number and cash flow source doesn't care about you, your family, your dreams, or your future. And I highly doubt your dad is working there either. That perceived, unrealized wealth you thought you had accumulated at the end of 2021 before reality began to set in over the past few months is an illusion, a magic trick performed by the Wall Street banksters and their government bureaucratic puppets at the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury. Yeah, you might get your gains and principal savings back in 5, 10, or 25 years, but what will a bigger correction to valuations do to you mentally? How will it impact your life today, your relationships today, your dreams today? Education is found on your own, aggregating disaggregated facts from an information blizzard in this knowledge economy. It's no longer found in a structured academic setting where theories and models are drilled over and then buried deep within complicated reports full of industry jargon, filed away in the academic safe and digital landfill of research reports, talking circles about their own narrow niche view of the world. Self-licking ice cream cones is what that mindset is. My true education began after leaving my fourth academic degree program. My wealth became clearer after getting my self-identity back from uniformed service. My wealth became safer when I began getting educated and diversifying my risk exposure across multiple asset classes with appropriate allocation and position sizing within each class for my risk tolerance and goals for my life. My wealth is in my time, my imagination, knowledge, and experience, and the store of those four things across a wide variety of interests. And my wealth is in the relationships I'm building back up that were lost over 2 decades of uniformed, uninformed service to the nation. Where's your wealth held today? To your liberty? Heck yeah.